You're very welcome back to the show. 083 300 3300 for any of your texts this evening. Now, so I'm joined on the line by Dr. Colm Moore, and Colm is from Rentokil. Colm, you're very welcome to Agri Time.
Thanks, Ashley.
Now, Colm, I suppose we have you on, and it's a matter of interest, I suppose, to all farms and unfortunately homes and businesses alike. It's the issue of pest control, and I suppose in particular we're talking about rat bait here, because changes did come in recent times in relation to the use of rat bait. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
They have indeed. Actually, what's happened is every 5 years or so, the rodenticide products go through a series of renewals. So the registration goes through renewal. And every time it goes to that stage, different controls are placed on the label. So the pressure, the direction of traffic, as it were, is to sort of minimise the use of rodenticides because of the impact it has on the environment. And that's the main drive for this. So some of the controls are around the use, the product of the use, and who uses it as well.
And what, is there a particular chemical that they're trying to phase out and move away from, or is it just the poison itself that they're trying to move away from?
Yeah, they're known as AVKs, so it's all rodenticides. So everything that kills, effectively everything that kills a rodent in the form of an anticoagulant. It's that range of products that's within scope of these rules.
And as you mentioned there, Colm, there's a couple of reasons for moving away from these products.
That's right, yes. One is protect the environment. So rodenticides can get into the environment in two main ways and poison others. One is by primary poisoning and the other is by secondary poisoning. So primary is like a dog eats the rodenticide bait. The secondary poisoning is the one that's a little bit more tricky and people don't really see. Is when that bait is eaten by slugs, snails, small passerines, and it goes up the food chain up to something like the raptors, like a barn owl or something like that. And that's what we're trying to protect. And
we've seen as well, maybe more of the birds that might scavenge as well, and if they came across maybe a rat that had died after being poisoned, there's a risk to them as well.
Yeah, so you've got scavenger raptors as well, who will feed on the carcasses, and if they feed on the dead carcasses, then if you're not picking up the carcasses after a rodent or during a rodent control program, you're increasing the risk of getting the residues within the environment.
We see pressure, I suppose, on glyphosate, and, that's a big chemical involved in the agriculture sector, Colm, and a kind of a move away from that, or efforts to move away from that. Could we see in the future, a move away from these rodenticides entirely, what I mean? Is that the end goal, or will there always be a role for these chemicals?
Well, at the moment, there is a role for them. There absolutely is, because when you're in trouble, there is no real effective alternative. So when things get bad, and I think, again, to use the phrase, the direction of traffic in this is when the wheels of regulatory move within the EU, they will move towards less and less use. So it's either going to be people are going to have to use non-toxic alternatives or use it in a sustainable way. So in other words, you're minimising the use of that toxin. And I think that's where it's going to go in the short term. In the long term, it probably will disappear. And you might have single use or emergency use for rodenticides, but we're a bit off that yet, I think.
Yeah, and there'll probably be a bit of convincing to do, because I suppose the farmers who'll be listening to us, and people living in rural parts of the county, and indeed urban parts of the county as well, who might have had issues or are having issues at the moment with rodents, they need to be convinced that what they're using is going to be effective and quick and will deal with this problem.
Absolutely, because there's a public health risk, and you have to balance that up, and there's risk to farming products, to raw products and foodstuffs that that gets contaminated and then goes up the food chain. That's not what we want. So we want to be able to protect the food chain, the human food chain, and the public health, as well as keeping mindful of the environment as well.
It's probably an off-topic or kind of related topic, Colm, but I suppose in terms of the rat and mouse population, have they increased or decreased, or are they pretty much always at the same level, or do we know that?
Well, we can base it on calls. Now, I haven't run the figures for this quarter, for January, but certainly we'll always get a peak. We always get our calls and inquiries jump through the roof around September, October. And that's typically actually because of the weather. The food sources are depleted, and as I said, weather. Rats are like us. We need a home, we need warmth, we need shelter, and we need food. So it kind of drives them in.
Is there a way, Colm, to naturally prevent, and I suppose very difficult in a situation like a farmyard, to kind of maybe minimise the attraction of rodents to your farmyard? Is there any practical things that can be done to prevent the infestation in the first instance, or is that practical?
Well, there are certain things you can do. I mean, it's like it's trying to make feed less available, try and reduce the amount of cover for rodents, so it's good housekeeping. So instead of stacking up a whole load of pallets and waste and stuff in a corner and leave it, it's keep that managed, keep it well managed. So rodents won't like really coming out in the open unless they're there in droves, and they're very, very hungry. So it's trying to reduce their movements and their harbourages is number one, and then that's trying to keep them generally away. Then if there is food available, try and make it less accessible. Now, I know that sometimes can't be practical, but raising it up off the ground even is a step that could be made, and it can help. Keep monitoring, keep an eye out for them. You'll get pockets of rodents maybe in a particular area. It's about trying to find the source. Where are they coming from? So it could be, a couple of 100 metres away. It could be, in an adjacent field, in an embankment by a river, and it's knowing where they're coming from and identifying that, and then you can nail them down.
And Rentokil themselves, or yourselves, I should say, Colm, ye are kind of moving away. You're developing non-toxic pest control solutions. I suppose in terms of the regulation changes that we mentioned at the start of the interview, those changes would apply to businesses, but it's a little bit different when it comes to farms. Could you maybe outline the difference in the change of regulations for the use of rat bait?
Yeah, sure. There's three sort of classifications of users, as it were. So one is a trained professional user, and that's ourselves. And then there's a professional user who would be a farmer. And then you've got amateurs, and that's the rodenticides that you see in the supermarkets and co-op. So they're the three main types of users. So in order to let's just take the farmers, for example. So if you have a herd number, you can actually apply rodenticides. You can use rodenticides, but you can only use it in your own farm. Yeah, it's for farming purposes only, and you're restricted around. You can't burrow bait, for example. You can't put it into a burrow. So it's restricted for in and around a building. If you're a business operating, so in other words, it's a trade operating from the farm, it's a different kettle of fish. Then you then fall under what I have to do with my team is you've got to apply for a pest management user number, and that's called a PMU number in the trade, and you have to sit a 2-day course, and that would permit you to operate and use rodenticides on the farm. And that's for trade only. So if it's a farming only, all you need is a herd number or a PU number. And then if it's a business operating on the farm, you need this PMU number with a 2-day course. As a professional user, we have a 5-day course. We have a longer course to attend, and we've got field training, and we also have to train individuals on how to do environmental risk assessment, so that they know what they're dealing and what the risks are when they're putting down rodenticides, so that they can minimise the impact on the environment.
Yeah, well, I suppose, Colm, to finish up, it's always going to be a part of life, because I think as long as we've been here, and I'd say probably even before, the rodents have been here, and they might outlive us yet. So it is something that we'll always have to tackle, but very interesting to hear the developments in the area, and I suppose what the future may hold.
Yes, absolutely. And if anybody needs any further information, just visit our website, rentokil.ie, for any other information, or give us a ring.
Lovely. Dr. Colm Moore, thank you so much for joining us on the show.
You're very welcome.